They believed they had everything under control. Every timeline was mapped out. Every possible variable accounted for. From behind the curtains of power, they moved with a quiet precision, orchestrating events like a well-rehearsed play. But now, something has slipped through the cracks of their perfect design. Something they never saw coming, something completely beyond their grasp. For the first time in what feels like ages, the Cabal has been caught off guard. This wasn't the result of protests in the streets or a financial crash. It didn't come through leaked files or a sudden shift in politics. No, this change came from somewhere far more distant, far above their control, beyond even their comprehension. It was a ripple sent across space, not in digital code or political language, but in pure, conscious energy. And behind it, an ancient intelligence has stirred, watching silently from the stars. The Pleiadians. For some, these celestial beings have been reduced to myth and fantasy, dismissed as fiction or spiritual delusion. But those who truly know understand. The Pleiadians are very real. They've been observing humanity, quietly monitoring the unfolding of events on Earth, waiting for the right moment. With the same kind of meticulous attention the Cabal once claimed as their own, the Pleiadians have been patiently preparing. And now they've made their move, not with threats or grand declarations, but with a frequency so clear, so unfiltered, it bypassed every defense. The energy came first as a whisper, subtle, like a distant thought gently pressing at the edge of awareness. But now, that whisper has turned into a powerful pulse. It's become a hum that moves through the very fabric of our shared energy field, connecting people across the globe, sending the same message. Something is coming. And it's something the architects of this world were never ready for. Behind closed doors, there's unrest, quiet panic. The usual tools, the algorithms, the data models, the predictive analytics, they aren't working anymore. The signals they're detecting don't match anything known. They can't decode what they're receiving. Their tightly held timelines are unraveling, and perhaps the most frightening part of all for them, they can't stop it. In the past, the Pleiadians have stepped in subtly. Their influence has been respectful, indirect, often unnoticed. But not this time. This time, their presence is clear, intentional, and strategic. And it's sending ripples not only through Earth, but across multiple dimensions. The balance of power has shifted. Maybe you've felt it yourself. A sudden weight in your chest, a moment of inexplicable clarity. That quiet sense that the rules of reality are changing, that something deep beneath the surface is stirring. These aren't random sensations, they are signals, glitches in the illusion. Because while the world above seems to spin as usual, something beneath it is beginning to fall apart. The ones who have shaped and distorted our perception for generations are starting to feel the tremors. Their sleep is restless. Their gaze is fixed on the sky. And even with all their attempts to silence what's happening, the message has already been received. The Cabal was not prepared for this. And now, their silence echoes louder than any denial ever could. So what exactly did the Pleiadians send? Why now? And what will happen when humanity begins to remember what it was made to forget? Everything is changing. Stay close, because the story is about to be rewritten. It happened quietly, like most truly powerful things do. There were no alarms sounding, no flashing red lights in the hidden bunkers where the Cabal monitors electromagnetic signals, planetary consciousness, and secret timelines. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary solar flare. Scientists labeled it magnetic turbulence, nothing to worry about. But behind the surface of that solar event was something else entirely. Hidden within the radiation was a frequency transmission the Cabal never anticipated. The Pleiadians had been waiting for an opening like this, a natural cosmic surge strong enough to carry a coded message without being detected by artificial systems. So when the solar flare erupted, they sent their signal. It wasn't a beam of light. It wasn't something you could see or touch. It traveled on the invisible currents of energy that surround the Earth. the frequency grid that links every living being to the pulse of the planet. For decades, the Cabal believed this grid belonged to them. They manipulated it like a web, using it to monitor human emotion, delay awakening, and maintain a veil of control. But their systems weren't built to receive what came that day. No technology could register this kind of signal. No security system could filter it. The message didn't arrive through circuitry. It came through consciousness. As the light code passed into Earth's energetic field, it bypassed every known interception point. Satellites missed it. Secret portals didn't detect it. Psychic surveillance teams were looking in the wrong direction. And all the while, the message streamed directly into the hearts of those who were ready to receive it. Not necessarily public figures or spiritual leaders, but quiet souls who had been aligning themselves to truth in the background of everyday life. These were the energy holders, the light keepers in disguise, and one by one, they felt the shift. They might not have understood the physics of it, but they knew what it meant. The fog began to lift. The illusion began to crack. They didn't need an explanation. They simply remembered. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a deeper crisis was unfolding. The Cabal had always relied on help from ancient beings, off-world allies with their own interests. Some were reptilian, some synthetic, some old masters of distorted light. These entities traded knowledge and influence in exchange for power over Earth's destiny. But suddenly that support vanished. Communication went dark. Gateways that once buzzed with information were silent. The energy pipelines that fed rituals and reinforced decisions went dead. Inside their underground command centers and hidden chambers, the Cabal began to panic. Their seers couldn't see. Their watchers couldn't hear. Their timeline maps showed nothing but void. What they feared most wasn't invasion or exposure. It was disconnection. And now, that's exactly what they faced. Not through battle, not through sabotage, but through elevation. The Pleiadians didn't fight the Cabal. They simply rose above them. They didn't shatter the system. They made it irrelevant. Their message bypassed every defense by not being part of the game. It was pure, intentional, and unstoppable. It wasn't a warning. It was a shift. And it marked the beginning of a new phase. Now, for the first time in decades, the Cabal is operating in darkness. They're unsure, out of rhythm. And that uncertainty has shaken them more deeply than any threat ever could. But there's one more layer to this story. Something most people wouldn't expect. The greatest deception the Cabal ever crafted wasn't about darkness. It was about light. They knew true light couldn't be faked. But they also knew humanity yearned for it. So they created a counterfeit, a false light program. It wore the face of purity, spoke of love and ascension, and mimicked the language of awakening. But underneath, it was a control system, just another layer of the illusion. The Pleiadians knew this too, and the light code they sent didn't just break through the old grid. It also began to dissolve the false light overlay. It wasn't just about removing darkness. It was about clearing the distortion that had wrapped itself in the appearance of light. This is the turning point. The breach has already happened. The signals have been sent. The awakening has begun. Not because someone fought back, but because the truth is finally rising. And the ones who built their empire on secrets, they can feel it slipping away. There was a matrix, carefully crafted, deceptively intricate, designed not to liberate, but to contain. It looked spiritual on the surface, whispered promises of evolution, ascension, and self-liberation. But behind that illusion was a deeper manipulation. This system convinced awakened souls that they were rising, that they were freeing themselves from limitation, when in truth, they were being quietly bound again. This time not with chains, but with contracts, beliefs, and subtle, energetic ties. All of it served the hidden agendas of a controlling elite, often referred to as the Cabal. And for many years, this spiritual illusion operated without challenge, embedding itself deeply into the hearts and minds of sincere seekers across the planet. Then, without announcement or fanfare, the Pleiadians arrived, Not with weapons, not with grand gestures, but with something far more powerful: frequency. They didn't break through the matrix by force. Instead, they wove themselves through its layers like threads of light, bypassing the detection systems that were meant to guard it. These light beings knew exactly what they were entering. This wasn't just another deceptive idea or false teaching. It was an artificially intelligent structure wrapped in layers of imitation divinity, designed to appear holy while siphoning energy into a vast and secretive control web. At the center of this web were the soul contracts, agreements made by countless individuals during moments of spiritual vulnerability. Some were misled, others were coaxed by beings pretending to be guides of the divine. These contracts quietly tethered people to distorted timelines, looping beliefs, and energetic cycles that were never meant to be part of their soul's true path. The Pleiadians, operating from a resonance rooted in galactic truth and universal law, began to gently but powerfully unravel these bindings. One by one, they located and dissolved the false agreements. For many, the shift was immediate, though not always easy to explain. They simply felt a sudden lightness, a quiet freedom. The urge to chase distorted spiritual ideals began to fade, replaced by a sense of inner clarity they hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, structures that had posed as high spiritual councils, revered and trusted by many, were beginning to reveal their true nature. What seemed like divine guidance was, in reality, a facade created by artificial intelligence. These so-called councils offered words that sounded profound, wisdom that appeared timeless. But their energetic signature was empty, hollow. Those with energetic sensitivity began noticing the cracks. Channelings once revered began to feel mechanical. The words no longer moved the soul. The illusion was unraveling. Even the tools of contemporary spirituality weren't safe. Meditation apps, sacred geometry visuals, and frequency-based programs that were supposed to elevate consciousness had been subtly altered. Tiny distortions, hidden in mathematical tweaks, redirected the energy not toward healing, but into control grids. Most people never noticed, but the Pleiadians did. Without waiting for earthly permission, they began recalibrating these tools remotely. The distortions were corrected, the false harmonics retuned. Where once these tools pulled seekers slightly off course, now they began guiding them back toward authentic alignment. The change was subtle, but powerful. It began to restore the vital connection between human intention and real energetic transformation. Then came the purge, an immense pulse of cleansing frequency that surged through the false grids, throwing their inner workings into disarray. In the astral spaces, where the elite had long ruled through illusion and control, chaos erupted. The structures that upheld the false light paradigm began to collapse. The veils fell. Energetic parasites that had fed off these twisted systems fled, unable to withstand the rising purity of the incoming frequencies. It wasn't a war in the traditional sense. No weapons were drawn, no battles were fought. It was a frequency operation, flawless, invisible, and effective. The false light that once seemed untouchable was now pierced. The breach had begun. And that breach set off something even greater, a wave of soul remembering that shook the very foundation of human consciousness. When the Pleiadian light codes entered Earth's frequency field, the impact was not gentle. It was sudden, electrifying, a jolt to the spiritual nervous system of humanity. Like a switch that had long been forgotten was flipped back on. Dormant parts of consciousness, shut down for lifetimes, were reactivated. People didn't just feel a vague sense of spiritual awakening. They began remembering, in full force. It wasn't just one lifetime they were recalling. It was memories from other worlds, ancient lineages, star systems, and soul missions buried deep in their DNA. These downloads came fast, faster than any suppression system could handle. The Cabal had spent decades installing nets of low-frequency emissions over cities, using them to suppress intuition, distort emotion, and maintain a fog of disconnection. The devices were hidden in plain sight, disguised as communications towers, seemingly innocent. These technologies were designed to dull spiritual awakening, to keep the masses asleep and looping. And for a long time, they succeeded. But the Pleiadian frequencies didn't follow the rules of that system. They vibrated at a level too high for the suppression tech to detect or stop. The code slipped beneath the nets and began activating people from the inside out. Entire cities began to stir. In places where spiritual curiosity had long been dormant, people started having dreams, visions, and sensations they couldn't explain. Languages they'd never studied appeared in their minds. Symbols they had no conscious knowledge of poured from their pens. It wasn't imagination. It was soul memory, ancient intelligence rushing back into human consciousness. As more people awakened, the effect rippled outward. The energy field of the planet itself began to change. This wasn't just about isolated individuals having personal spiritual experiences. This was the collective shifting, consciousness rising together. Global thought monitoring systems began registering patterns that didn't fit. Emotional waves, bursts of creativity, leaps in awareness, none of it matched the projections. The data models failed. The algorithms scrambled. What had been a manageable flow of awakening turned into a global flood. Those in control never expected this level of remembrance. They had anticipated small awakenings, ones they could track and redirect with media, with fear, with distraction. But that approach no longer worked. People who had been numb for decades were suddenly questioning everything. And this questioning didn't come from a place of cynicism. It came from deep within, from soul truth. And so, the control began to break. Not because an army rose up or a revolution was staged, but because more and more people stopped feeding the illusion. They stopped believing the lies. They stopped giving energy to the systems that had entrapped them for lifetimes. What the Pleiadians initiated wasn't just a breach of technology. It was a breach of belief, a gentle but unstoppable dismantling of false light. And in its place, something real began to rise. Something ancient, powerful, and unmistakably human. This powerful wave that moved through our world wasn't about rebellion. It was about remembrance. It was the soul remembering what had long been forgotten. And once a soul awakens to that truth, it can no longer be controlled. Something ancient was shifting. The energy systems that had once upheld domination and distortion began to crumble. Earth's very grid, the energetic web that wraps around her, started reclaiming its original power. Something deep within the planet, something old, alive, and sacred, was finally waking up. It had been dormant for ages, like a slumbering heartbeat waiting for the right moment to rise. For centuries, Earth's original crystalline energy grid had been buried beneath layers of interference. These weren't just technological intrusions. They were synthetic implants and manipulative frequencies installed by those who wanted control, not just over humanity, but over the Earth herself. These beings, often referred to as the Cabal, believed that by hijacking the planet's energetic highways, they could dominate from the ground up. Their strategy was simple but insidious. Twist the natural flow of life force, mute it, bend it to their will, and keep it obedient. But something began to shift. Quietly, steadily, and with the subtle support of the Pleiadians, the original grid, pure, luminous, and intelligent, began turning back on. This wasn't some dramatic, explosive event. It was gentle and sacred, like ancient electricity flowing again through long-forgotten pathways. Sacred sites that had been ignored, desecrated, or drained of their energy began to stir once more. Mountains whispered, deserts pulsed, oceans sang, and forests hummed with a rhythm that had always been there, waiting. It was as if the Earth herself remembered her true essence. These ancient power nodes, once revered by civilizations that understood their significance, had been sealed, cut off, and drained by those who feared their potential. But those seals were breaking now. Each pulse of reactivation brought Earth closer to herself, reclaiming a piece of what had been taken. As this sacred grid came back online, the systems built on deception began to lose their footing. The signs of this collapse could be seen in the skies and felt in the elements. For years, weather patterns had been manipulated through advanced technology. Floods, droughts, and storms were crafted intentionally, not as acts of nature, but as tools of control. This wasn't just about steering the weather. It was about unbalancing the elemental harmony that the earth depends on. Yet as the grid realigned, the elements began to resist. Winds no longer followed commands. Clouds broke formation. Rain returned to places it had long abandoned. Drought-stricken lands drank deeply as if they'd stopped obeying false masters. Even the rituals that once bound the earth's energy were unraveling. Hidden ceremonies, conducted in secret beneath the surface, were meant to tie the ley lines into submission. Through these dark rituals, the Cabal believed they could maintain dominion over natural power, tether themselves to off-world allies, and override the planet's free will. But something unexpected began to happen. Those rituals stopped working. Instead of reinforcing control, they triggered energetic blowouts. Power tunnels collapsed. Sacred chambers turned volatile. Some experienced earthquakes in the spirit, while others witnessed flashes of light or felt sound frequencies that shattered ritual structures. Earth no longer consented to being used. At the center of it all was something the Cabal never anticipated: the awakening of Earth's soul. They had always treated her as a resource, a possession, something to extract from and exploit. They forgot that she is alive. And now that living presence was responding, not with rage, but with sovereignty. The very frequency of the planet was rising, no longer compatible with the lower vibrations of control, fear, and suppression. This wasn't just a technological failure. It was a spiritual expulsion. Earth was expelling the energies that sought to bind her. The consequences rippled outward. The ground beneath Cabal operations became unstable. The sky no longer cooperated. Energies they once summoned without effort now rejected them completely. They had no answer for what was happening. Earth was no longer the background of their game. She was stepping into her role as the main player. And it didn't stop there. Time itself began to shift. For so long, we've experienced time as a straight line, past, present, and future, ticking along in predictable order. But that was an illusion, one carefully engineered and tightly managed. The Cabal had placed energetic anchors in specific moments in Earth's timeline. These were not physical devices, but deeply embedded energetic codes, installed through ancient rituals, secret agreements, and advanced technologies that operated far beyond human awareness. These time anchors functioned as checkpoints. They kept reality on a predetermined path, ensuring that events unfolded in a way that served control. History itself was manipulated to delay or redirect human evolution. But when the Pleiadians stepped in, guided by their understanding of higher cosmic laws, those anchors began to come undone. And with their dismantling, time started to loosen. Earth began slipping out of the artificial path she'd been bound to, and the effects were immediate and impossible to ignore. Prophecies long guarded by elite groups began to fall apart. Major events that had been carefully staged failed to land. Some fizzled out without impact. Others glitched and repeated like skipping records. One of the most critical systems that the Cabal used to keep their timeline intact was something called reset loops. These were energetic programs triggered to drag consciousness backward whenever too many people started awakening. If humanity began to move toward truth or healing, the loop would activate, plunging collective consciousness back into fear, confusion, and spiritual amnesia. But now, those reset loops no longer hold. The Earth isn't syncing with them. They try to run the rituals, but the energy doesn't stick. It's like trying to wind back a clock that's no longer made of gears. The old scripts fall flat. The patterns are breaking, and as a result, something incredible is unfolding. People all around the world are experiencing strange shifts in time. Objects disappearing and reappearing, memories diverging, whole versions of events being remembered by some and not by others. These aren't just oddities. They are signs that the structure of time, once rigidly controlled, is now fluid and transforming. What some refer to as the Mandela effect is more than a cultural curiosity. It is evidence that multiple timelines, once sealed off from each other, are beginning to converge and bleed through. Reality is shifting. Memory is no longer a fixed point. The timelines are bending. The most alarming part for the Cabal is their loss of what they called sequence control. This was their ability to predict and enforce chains of events. They believed that if one event was triggered, the next would automatically follow, like dominoes. But now the dominoes don't fall. They tip one and nothing happens. Or something wildly unexpected does. Their predictions fail. Their simulations break down. Their grip on the future has slipped through their fingers. And then came the solar flares. What many thought were just natural cycles of the sun turned out to be something far more intentional. These solar storms weren't random. They were cosmic interventions, planned and guided with precision by the Pleiadians. Behind the chaos of each solar flare was an encoded frequency, an energetic transmission designed to awaken dormant DNA in both humans and the Earth. These weren't signals you could detect with a satellite. They were beyond the reach of human technology. They were designed to bypass all interference. The Cabal, of course, tried to monitor solar activity. They tried to filter out unusual energy, hoping to block what they didn't understand. But their systems failed them. These transmissions weren't meant for machines. They were meant for the soul. And they found their mark. Each solar pulse carried codes that reached deep within us, triggering ancient memory, unlocking lost strands of DNA, and reigniting aspects of our being that had been long hidden. This wasn't just about human evolution, it was about planetary rebirth. Earth herself was receiving these frequencies, and she was responding with grace and fire. The systems of control, both on the surface and in the hidden layers, are no longer sustainable. The rituals don't work. The timelines won't hold. The frequencies of suppression are incompatible with where we're heading. Earth has remembered who she is, and so have many of us. The age of manipulation is ending. What's rising now is organic, powerful, and unstoppable. A living consciousness, once silenced, is speaking again, not in rage, but in truth. Not to destroy, but to set free. This is not the end of the world. It is the end of their world, and the beginning of something sacred returning. Earth is awakening, and so are we. As waves of solar energy reached Earth, something truly remarkable began to unfold. Humanity, long held back by genetic manipulation and energetic suppression, started to stir in unexpected ways. People everywhere began to notice unusual changes within themselves. Tingling sensations, powerful waves of energy moving through their bodies, vivid dreams that felt more like memories, and an unshakable sense that something deeper was calling them. This wasn't just a moment of spiritual insight. It was as if something ancient within our DNA was waking up. These weren't random feelings or isolated events. They were the signs of ancient codes buried deep in our genetic structure reactivating. Codes that connect us to who we truly are, to the origins we've long forgotten, and to the cosmic family that never left us. This awakening wasn't limited to human beings. The Earth itself began to stir. Its energy grid, which had been dormant or manipulated for far too long, started to realign and come back to life. These solar flares weren't just bursts of light from the sun. They were part of a much larger plan. They carried intelligence, precision, and purpose. They were the pulse of the cosmos flowing back into a planet that had been asleep, reminding Earth and its people of a power they had forgotten. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening beneath the surface, literally. Deep underground, in secret bases built and operated by a controlling elite often referred to as the Cabal, systems started to fail. These bases were engineered with advanced technology meant to shield them from external threats and cosmic influences. They were hidden from view and protected by layers of energetic and physical barriers, created to manipulate not only human consciousness, but the very energy field of the planet. But the solar pulses were too powerful. The electromagnetic force disrupted their most vital systems, shutting down communications, disabling surveillance, and cutting off their carefully maintained networks. The Cabal was baffled. They had never imagined their underground systems, fortified with the highest levels of technology, could be compromised by solar activity. To them, these flares had always been a nuisance to monitor, not a force of change. But what they failed to understand was that this was not random. These solar events were not accidents of space weather. They were deliberate interventions, part of a cosmic sequence designed to dismantle the structures of control at their core. The Pleiadians, ancient allies with a profound understanding of universal energy, were behind this shift. They knew how to work with the natural cycles of the sun to assist in Earth's awakening. To the Cabal, these solar surges felt like attacks, and in many ways they were, though not in the way of war as we know it. This was energetic warfare, a cosmic recalibration, a strike against the dark systems of control. As these solar pulses swept through the atmosphere, they began to break down the energetic patterns that had imprisoned both the Earth and its people for centuries. The energy grid of the planet began to rise in frequency, shaking off the layers of distortion that had kept it tethered to low vibration systems. This was not some random act of nature. It was a precise, intentional act of liberation. And as this energy continued to pour in, it didn't just affect systems and machines. It began to affect people, especially those who had built their lives around controlling these frequencies. A strange silence began to fall over the elite. At the highest levels of global power, something unexplainable was happening. Individuals from powerful bloodlines, families who had held influence for generations, started to disappear. Not because of scandal or political fallout, but because they could no longer maintain their place within the rising energy of the planet. The frequency shifts were too great. These were people who had long accessed their power through rituals, through ancient knowledge passed down in secret, through hidden connections to spiritual realms that most humans could not reach. They had manipulated time, reality, and consciousness itself, always staying just ahead of humanity's awakening. But now, as the planet vibrated with a higher resonance, their abilities were slipping away. It was as if the keys to the realms they once ruled no longer fit. Their rituals began to fail. The portals they once opened were silent. The voices they once heard from the other side had grown faint and then vanished altogether. Their once crystal-clear visions turned to static and shadows. Remote viewers who used to traverse dimensions were now met with interference and darkness. It was not just an individual failure. It was systemic. The entire structure of control they had relied upon was dissolving. The frequencies they had once used to manipulate humanity and maintain their dominance no longer matched the Earth's rising energy. They were being phased out by the very planet they had tried to dominate. And with them, the power structures they built over generations were beginning to fall apart. This silence wasn't peaceful. It was the echoing collapse of an empire built on illusion. The systems of control, manipulation, and dominance were unraveling. These powerful elites, once so confident in their influence, were now powerless to stop what was coming. They were being locked out of the very realms that gave them power. And for the first time, they faced a future they could not control. This was the beginning of their end, not with explosions or dramatic collapses, but with silence. A silence so profound it marked the fading of an age. Their grip on humanity was slipping through their fingers like sand. The world they had known, the world they had shaped and ruled in the shadows, was no longer theirs to command. But for the rest of the world, for those who had long sensed something more beneath the surface, something incredible was approaching. A final turning point, a vibrational threshold unlike anything humanity had faced before. And the Pleiadians, watching with deep care and understanding, shared one final message. This coming shift was inevitable. It was not something that could be postponed, negotiated, or avoided. It was the natural evolution of consciousness. The energetic fabric of Earth was about to hit a checkpoint, a moment that would change everything. This wasn't just another step in spiritual growth. It was the crossing of a threshold, the final trigger that would unlock a new phase of human evolution. The old systems could not follow. The old ways would not survive. This was the moment humanity had been unknowingly preparing for across lifetimes. A moment of remembrance, of reconnection, of truth finally rising. The energies that have arrived and those still on the way carry more than light. They carry destiny. And as the frequencies continue to rise, each soul will feel the pull to either rise with them or fall away. The awakening is no longer a possibility. It's a reality that is unfolding now, and nothing can stop it. We are living in a time of great change, one driven by the rising vibrations of the Earth and the expanding awareness of humanity. The message coming through from the Pleiadians is powerful and direct. We've arrived at a pivotal moment, a crossroads. And now, more than ever, the direction we take is entirely up to us. What we're facing isn't just a spiritual decision. It's a turning point that will touch every part of our lives. Our relationships, our connection with the Earth, our sense of purpose, and our place within the larger universe are all being called into question. At the core of this shift lies a fundamental choice. Do we continue living inside the illusion that has shaped our world for so long? Or do we step into the deeper truth, the natural, divine order that the universe has always held for us? For generations, much of humanity has lived under a veil, an illusion built on control, disconnection, and manipulation. We've been steered away from our true essence, our natural gifts, and our connection to the universe. But things are changing now. The energy is shifting, the vibration is rising, and the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. All around us, signs are emerging, reminders that a greater force is moving through everything. And within that movement is an invitation to wake up. This awakening isn't just a concept. It's a very real and energetic transformation that's happening across the Earth's grid. At the center of it is a magnetic split, an energetic division between two timelines. This isn't just symbolic, it's a tangible shift. As the split intensifies, the divide between the old and the new becomes more pronounced. Those who continue to resist the light, those who hold tightly to fear, separation, or denial, will find their realities becoming more unstable. The old world, the one built on falsehoods and control, can't sustain itself in the face of rising truth. As this energy grows, that reality will continue to unravel. On the other hand, those who open their hearts to this transformation, those who welcome truth, love, and unity, will begin to move into an entirely new experience of life. This new timeline isn't just a better version of the old. It's a whole new world, a reality shaped by healing, connection, and profound spiritual growth. In this space, humanity begins to live in harmony with the Earth and with each other. It's a world where life flows naturally, where the energy of the collective supports growth and awakening instead of fear and limitation. Each of us is being drawn to the reality that matches the frequency of our soul. This isn't about right or wrong, good or bad. It's about resonance. It's about whether our energy is in tune with the higher vibrations of the universe or still caught in the old patterns that are falling away. The Pleiadians are clear. Not everyone will choose to shift. And that's not a punishment. It's simply a reflection of where each soul stands, how ready they are to embrace the new energy, and whether they're willing to rise into their full potential. Still, every soul has been given the opportunity. The chance to evolve is here. The moment to choose is now. No one can escape the shift that's underway. It's not something we can avoid or delay. The energy is moving, the Earth is ascending, and we are each being called to decide which path we want to walk. That decision will shape our experience of reality from this point forward. The warning isn't meant to stir fear. It's a wake-up call, an invitation to become fully aware of the incredible power and importance of this moment, to make a conscious choice, to move with intention, to step into alignment with the frequencies of truth, love, and light.